conflict and disagreement remain.
Are you worried about technology theft, or that they're getting access to chips that export control should be preventing them from getting access to black wells and other things?
Yeah, and every agreement the president's made has all gone through a full national security review to minimize and mitigate against that. Obviously, no measures are perfect. They've also been developing their own native capabilities. Oftentimes, we would imagine by information they've garnered from other countries. These are all well-established things. But as far as the advances they have made. But that's what will continue to be part of the dynamic in this relationship and in balancing all of this out. But as I said, we've reached the point of sort of strategic stability. Both countries see value in that. We've gotten them to schedule more fentanyl precursors, which is important. Now we need them to act on it. We've seen them increase their purchase of American agricultural goods, but there are other areas where we wish they were doing more, and we'll continue to press on those.
Are they going to take you off the sanctions list so you can go?
We'll find out when I go.
Mr. Secretary, there were talks in Geneva this week between officials who deal with nuclear weapons from the United States, China, and Russia. I wondered if you could characterize how those talks, what came of those talks, and whether there's any sign that Chinese officials would consider some kind of trilateral nuclear non-proliferation treaty like the president has suggested we is seeking.
Well, we think ultimately in the 21st century, for there to be a true arms control agreement, it has to involve China. Their stockpiles have increased dramatically. Their position that they would argue is that they're still way behind the United States and Russia. We think that's irrelevant. They certainly have the capacity to catch up and are well on their way to doing so. So we believe, the president strongly believes, that for any sort of agreement, a nuclear agreement in the 21st century to be legitimate, it has to involve these three countries, the United States, Russia, and China. And we're going to continue to explore their willingness to do so. They have publicly said they're not willing to do it. I'm sure you've heard them say that. I'm sure they've reiterated and I know they restated that again very recently. But we'll continue to press on it because we think it would be good for the world if we could reach such an agreement. The president would be in favor of that if we could do it, but it has to be all three countries.
But how do you compel China to, if they're saying it's just not in our interest?
Well, then we may not have a deal. We can't compel them. They'll just have to argue to the world why they need to keep building nuclear weapons. And that's a sovereign choice that they can make. You can't compel anyone to make a deal. You can certainly create incentives for them to do it, but you can't compel it. So, we can pressure, we can guide, we can cajole, but we can't compel it. So ultimately, if they want to make an arms deal with the three countries, we're prepared to talk about it. If they don't want to do it, then we won't have one. We'll just keep doing what we need to do.
You guys spent 80 years also being with
Yeah.
recently. What's the great sense there? What are you looking for from nuclear arms from the practice?
Well, yeah, a couple things. We had a rough patch there early this year when the Transitional Council said they weren't going to leave. We addressed it forcefully. They left. So we're where we need to be now. The gang suppression force is building. We're very happy with the commitments we have gotten in terms of personnel. We feel like we've got more commitments than we have spots available for that gang suppression force. We need to do a little bit better on the funding. We're still looking for donor countries to fill in gaps, but we think we'll get there. It'll be under UN auspices, which is important for the UN to show they can solve the problem. And the goal of this entity will be to get on the ground and allow the Haitian authorities to hold territory from these gangs. So you can have a baseline of stability that allows you to do two things. Number one, rebuild the country without having to go through roads that have checkpoints run by these criminal gangs. And number two, hold elections, perhaps later this year. Maybe not in the middle of the summer when it's rainy season, but later this year. That's the desire they have as well. It's hard to hold elections, however, when you still have gangs conducting checkpoints. And those aren't going to be real elections. So that's why the gang suppression force is so important. And why, I'm very proud of the role the U.S. played in forming that. And I'm very happy at the role that countries like Canada and others have played. They're very forceful in helping us with this. There are a couple other countries who wish to step up and do a little more. And we'll be talking about that. I've raised it at every G7 meeting. And we've gotten good response. Japan has now made contributions and others. We need to get a few more donor countries up to the plate.
So, Secretary, in your meetings today, obviously a lot of these islands here have had good relations with Cuba. A lot of them have had these medical missions that they rely on. They send their own doctors, local doctors, to be trained in Cuban medical schools. Is this something that came up today? It obviously has been something that the U.S. is pressuring them to move away from. The other alternatives for a place like St. Kitts that is so small?
Yeah, well, we're providing alternatives to them. We have medical missions that can provide an alternative. And in fact, we've met some of those folks in the past. The other thing with the Cuban medical program is that the fact that these people are working, basically it's human trafficking. I mean, they're barely even being paid. There's freedom of movement is tightly restricted. And we want these countries to understand that's what they're participating in. They're paying this money to the regime, which collects the funds. You know, they get paid for these medical missions. Virtually none of this money goes to these doctors, who are in many cases, you know, we think it's like a version of human trafficking, labor trafficking. And we think it's wrong. Now, you've seen other countries that have decided, well, just pay the doctors directly, but the Cubans won't allow it. So, again, that's sort of the point we've raised with them. I mean, we're not going to cut diplomatic relations with countries in the Caribbean because they don't agree with us on it, but we make a forceful point about it, and it came up today. It wasn't the feature of the conversation, but it came up. All right, let's get out of here. One more. Are you guys all traveling?
Yeah.
All of them? No. Okay.
Come back to Cuba.
Sorry, the plane ain't that big. Go ahead.
Come back to Cuba. Some of the countries we met today that raised concerns about spillover instability caused by the humanitarian crisis there. Is the move today on oil sales a sort of recognition that the humanitarian crisis is getting out of hand, that the US?
No. First of all, forget about today. The humanitarian crisis is getting out of hand because the Cubans don't know how to run an economy. They're incompetent. They have a military-controlled holding company named Gaesa, which controls 40% of their GDP, and none of the money that company has generated flows to the coffers of the government. None of that money goes to schools. None of that money goes to roads. None of that money goes to feeding the population. You have a country that has fertile farmland that imports sugar. This is one of the world's leading exporters of sugar. Now they import sugar. They import almost all their food. It's a dysfunction. It's just not even an economy. It's like total dysfunction. That's their fault. As far as spillover effect, they're not more concerned than we are. We're 90 miles away. And the U.S. has experienced mass migration from Cuba in the past, certainly in the early 90s with the Raptor crisis, but as recently as 2021 and 22, we were having people show up in the Florida Keys and stranded in the Bahamas. So we don't want to see it either. And ultimately, as far as the move today with the war, this is existing. The law allows us to do business like fuel and even telecommunications with the Cuban private sector. The problem is the Cuban private sector is very small. If they want to open the gates and allow the Cuban private sector, independent of the military, independent of the government, to grow, that solution is there. What the Cuban people should know is this, that if they are hungry and they are suffering, it's not because we're not prepared to help them. We are. It's that the people standing in the way of us helping them is the regime. It's their Communist Party. That's who's standing in the way. If they move out of the way, we're more than happy to work with individual Cubans so they can have an opportunity to feed their families and build their economy. But we are not the impediment. They are. All right?